Hey, welcome back to the Connor Larsen Show, episode 5, I think. Thanks for listening. This has been really fun. I've been doing all these episodes every week, and every week I'm pleasantly surprised. People like it. People seem to be interested. People tell me cool stuff I didn't know. So if you're one of those people, thanks. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. It's the end of April here. We are having a lot of fun. Me and my wife in the garden, we're out there. We finished the Yakasugi garden bed that I talked about in an episode a few ago, and that thing's awesome. That's like the first thing I've built where I'm like, I want to show people this. You know, I built a lot of stuff where I was kind of like, don't look too close. It's, some guy who grew up using power tools is going to look at it and be like, that sucks. This is the first one where I'm like, go ahead, look at it. I'm very pumped, and yeah, it was fun to have the podcast and all that, the research, all that stuff. I'm fine. That's what I like about this. I'm just doing stuff I would do anyway. And then if I can turn it into stuff other people like and sort of engage with other people about it and build stuff, it's great. It's very fun. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty grateful that people are into it. And then I'm just feeling pumped about springtime. I love springtime. We just had a big storm last night. It's tornado season, tornado time in Tennessee. That's the thing I never even knew for like the first 7-8 years I lived in Nashville. I didn't know we had tornadoes in April and May. I also lived in places where if a tornado hit it, I'd be like, great. I was trying to break this lease. This is a really big help. Thank you and I had to throw out a bunch of stuff that I didn't know how to get to the dump. So I'm glad you scattered it across Gallatin Road. That was a big help to me. But yeah, I used to belong to a gym, Gym 5 out in East Nashville, the best gym ever. The saddest part of me moving away from East Nashville was that I loved that gym. The coolest people, just like a one-off local gym, and they were just great. And they got hit by a tornado, and I remember I was out of town. I was doing shows down in Sarasota, Florida with my buddy Dusty Slay. This was 2020. They got hit with it, and I remember all the gym people came out and they like rebuilt the gym, and they had a bent barbell hanging. I think they probably still do. That got smashed by that tornado, but it was cool. It was like, that gym was such a great. It was just like a local business thing. It's all the things people say about local business you want, where you're like, I like that guy. Adam's like a big, muscly dude who at first you're like, is this guy scary? And then he's like, he's a nice guy. He rescues dogs and is really good to all the staff. And I missed that place. It was a great place. But yeah, I didn't know it's tornado season, but it is. And so now I'm a little paranoid because where I live, when I first moved in, people told me, they said a few years ago, tornado hit like your house. Like I got a guy like 5 or 6 houses down where he's like, yeah, we had to rebuild our house from the tornado. But then part of me goes, there's no way it's going to hit again, right? Like it's almost like if your house gets hit by lightning, you're like, it's not going to get hit again. Like I kind of feel confident that we'll never get hit. But it was a big, crazy storm last night. We had our neighbors got this giant tree, and big old branches keep snapping off of it. Some came off in the ice storm. Some came off yesterday. And man, you start to realize, like, I don't know. You always think if something crazy happened to you, it would kind of be your fault. You'd be like, I shouldn't have been doing. I might just be walking out there one day and then just a giant tree branch. I mean, that thing, it's like 10 feet long. I bet it's, I don't know how much it weighs, but it's a nightmare to move it. So I'm pretty sure if it fell on me, it would be bad news. But other than that, we've had beautiful weather. I've been getting a lot of stuff done. I started ripping out. We got a big tree of heaven in the back, it's not even one tree. It's like, 50. And it's just it's a neglected old fence line no one's looked at in 10 years. And I finally started ripping it out. I'll post a video about it. But I just took a little big, loppers and the chainsaw and just started cutting it down, and it feels great. It feels so fun to do. I mean, first of all, a chainsaw is just fun. I didn't grow up using chainsaws, and it feels good. I like chainsaws. I got a little tiny electric one. It's very lame. I love it though. It's someday I want to get like a big, Scandinavian. This is like, I live in Alaska and I need this chainsaw. But for now, my little yellow electric one it's all good. I had a lot of fun. So I've been doing that. And oh yeah, today's episode. Sorry, it took me forever. It's about bees. We're talking about bees today. I'm really going. This everything is sort of connected in this. The further I go into the garden, the more I realize bees are important. Bees are where it's at. And so I wanted to. I had a sense that bees were important, right? That's people when you somehow if you're alive, bees good, wasps bad. That's all I feel like that's all most people know. They go bees good, wasps bad. And bees have that sort of PR where you're like, oh yeah, bees are great, but no one really knows. It's hard to, a lot of people are just saying it and then you go, why? And they go, I don't know. I know I'm supposed to say that. Being pro bees is like it's like being pro butterfly. People are like vaguely aware that they're helpful and necessary for an environment. So they say like, oh, I love it, but they don't actually know anything. And I didn't know anything. I'm talking about me there. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get into bees. I'm going to learn about bees. And I'll be honest with you guys. I thought I was pretty cool. I was like, no one's into bees. I'm going to learn all about them. I'm going to be a weird guy. And then I started learning about bees and I realized I might be the billionth guy to get into bees. Bees, like people, humans have been obsessed with bees since the beginning. I mean, it's crazy. That was the thing I really was blown away by in this episode. Bees are, first of all, it's our oldest animal relationship, which, sorry about that. Tough phrasing. Even before dogs, people were domesticating and having a dynamic with bees where they took the honey, they used them. They were important parts of old societies. And then people have also been obsessed with bees. That's the thing I thought was so cool about this episode was you start to realize every culture has been kind of obsessed with bees. And it seems like people see what they want to see out of bees, right? The way, we'll go through this in the episode, but the way different civilizations talk about bees, it says a lot more about them than it does the bees. You know what I mean? The bees are the same. They're not really changing, but every culture focuses on different parts of the bees. And I think they start to, it's like anything else where people will kind of, you ever notice when people give you advice, you're like, it's just what they're doing right then. Everyone goes, the thing I'm doing right now is that's what is good advice. Because of course that makes, no one thinks they're doing the wrong thing or they would do something different. So it's sort of everyone's advice. Sometimes people give me advice and I go, do I need to be here for this? Like you ever have a buddy who, I don't really drink much, but I had a few friends who got sober and then I'd hang out with them and they'd be like, you just got to get sober. And I'd be like, I am kind of, I'm pretty close. I feel like this is you telling yourself, not me. But I get it. And I do it too, I'm sure. And it was fun to see what different cultures thought about bees and, it's sort of it's like the Rorschach test. You look at an ink blot and you're like, oh, that's my dad calling me fat or whatever. Like that, you see whatever it says more about you than it does the actual ink blot. That's what bees seem to be for people. But first of all, let's talk about what bees. Why do they matter, right? Because I knew vaguely bees are important, but I didn't really understand what they do. Bees are how flowers pollinate, right? The bees are going. The bees are on their way. They want some nectar, and then the flower's like, "Hey, when you get the nectar, take this pollen with you to the other flower." And the bee's like, "Whatever, man. I just want the nectar, but fine." And that's how they flower, right? That's how the flowers get germinated, and that's how they get pollinated. And that's how they produce fruit. And that's how they produce seed. So you got to have bees. If you want to have flowers, you got to have them. If you want to have fruit. Nuts, coffee, almonds, all these things depend on bees, right? If they say it's like 1/3 of every bite, so 1/3 of all the food you eat depends on bees, and it's pretty amazing how hard bees are working for all this stuff. That was the thing they say a pound of honey is the result of bees flying 55,000 miles, which is around the globe twice. So that's how much they're working. And every individual bee in their entire lifetime produces half a teaspoon of honey. It makes you feel bad when you're in a hotel and you miss you're like, well, that was 6 bees life work. But yeah, so bees are doing that. They're making honey. They're also like crucial to almonds. I didn't realize this, but every year, like 900 truckloads of almonds or 900 truckloads of bees go out to California, pollinate all the almonds. And that's like a big way people make money off bees. Not a lot of, I don't think there's a ton of money in bees. I think if you get into it, it's because you like bees, but it's still cool that you can. So yeah, there's this, and then I was doing a show last week in Knoxville. This was maybe like an omen to do this episode. I was doing a show in Knoxville and traffic was messed up, and we looked it up, and a guy had crashed a bee truck, and then all the bees got out, and people were just like, well, I don't know. I guess it's fine. You know, we're just going to let the bees. That's a tough call, I'm sure, though, if you're the truck driver, or you're like, all right, I got in a wreck, and I don't think I'm able to return your 1 million bees. But anyway, so the bees are important. That's what they do. And then they're also interesting, right? So you need them. That's cool. If they died out, you know, it's crazy. There's been some bee stuff recently where like bees are doing worse than they've ever done, which is just, you know, I feel like that's most natural stuff because we just are living such a bizarre, you know, corporate agriculture and people using pesticides and all this stuff. You know, it trickles down to bees. And I think we all realize like, we're not doing an ideal job of taking care of the environment. And, you know, so bees are a part of that. But, yeah, it's just interesting to see, like, so bees are doing not great, right? And if bees died out, you would still have food, right? There's a lot of food that is wind pollinated, meaning the seeds spread via wind, right? Like wheat and barley and all this stuff. So if we screw up hard enough and we lose the bees, we'll still have food. It'll just suck. Like that makes me more nervous because that's something I can see companies doing. I could see companies being like, we're sorry, we ruined all the bees, but now you can eat, you know, whatever, Walmart branded, you know, wheat paste or whatever. Like that. I mean, it's probably not going to happen in my lifetime, but it's still scary. But yeah, all the stuff you like, fruit, coffee, nuts, all that stuff, that's all, you need bees for that. So it's important we have bees. They're also cool. I think one of the reasons all the cultures got obsessed with them is bees are very cool. They have this crazy lifestyle. Bees are, first of all, most people have never seen a male bee. That blew my mind. Most bees are women, which there's so many funny, while I was doing research for this episode, there were so many funny things about like, bees are you know, basically girl bosses. Bees are really, it's all women. They're just doing all the work. The dudes the male bees are called drones, and they're like 5% of the bees. And most people never see one. I don't think I've ever seen one. Because the bee you see in your yard is usually almost always a forager bee. So bees have like jobs. They have different jobs throughout their life, and forager is the last one. So pretty much all the bees I'm seeing are like beat up, end of their life bees, which is crazy because you feel like you're seeing all the bees, but in reality you're probably not. So the male bees, their only job is to impregnate the queen, right? They're like young men. They only have one thing on their mind, and it's pretty funny. They don't really have any other skills. They're just there's so many parallels to like the way they talk about male bees. I'm like, that was pretty much me at 20, just a bumbling idiot who was like, I hope there's girls there. That was all I was really doing. And so the male bees, they just kind of hang out, and then they fly up in the sky and they find little areas that they deem are the right area for whatever reason, and they'll just wait. They'll just they just wait if a queen comes by, and then the queens will come and they will mate with some of the male bees, and then that's enough for them. They're like, I tried it, I'm not that into it, and then they'll take that back and they'll have eggs for the rest of their life. That's what queen bees, that's all they do. They just have eggs. They're not really that queen-like. They're just like a mom who had a lot of kids and is like exhausted. So it's the queen bee. It's also funny. The queen bee is not It's not anything different. It's just a bee that gets fed different food. That's what I thought was so interesting. The bees eat this thing called royal jelly, which is just like a protein-rich jelly. And every bee eats it for the first 3 days of their life. And then they stop feeding you that and they start feeding you whatever, bee slop. This is like less good bee food. But then the bees, they want to be queens, they feed them royal jelly for like 6 days. And that completely changes like genetically what turns on in the bee. So the bees that eat it for 3 days live for 6 weeks, the regular worker bees, female worker bees, and then the bees that eat it for 6 days become the queen, and they can live for 5 years, which is, that's like I don't know, it's an interesting idea that just the food you eat can be that different. You know what I mean? It's like that just 3 more days of that food and they're a whole different animal almost. And then the other, so there's the male bees. I don't know what they're doing. This whole thing is very complicated, and I'm still a dumb guy. So the male bees are somehow involved, but after they get the queen pregnant, they die, right? So when they hook up with the queen, it rips off part of their body and they die. It rips off like their stinger, which is nuts. It's like such a funny, they're basically born. They fly up in the sky and like hope a girl comes by. And then if they successfully match with this queen, they die. That's their whole. And then if they make it to like winter time, the female bees are like, this guy's useless, and they get rid of him. They kick him out of the hive and they freeze to death. That's another thing too that was cool about this episode. Bees are ruthless. Bees make Walmart seem like a mom and pop restaurant. Like they're just, whatever's best for the hive, they're doing it. They don't have any like he's a good guy, we should let him. They're like, get him out of here. We're getting rid of that bee. So all the bees have jobs. That's something I didn't realize too. They go through like 8 jobs in their life. They start out as they clean the hive, then they nurse the hive, then they build the hive. They make little beeswax, which is just, I didn't realize beeswax is just like sweat almost. Like it just comes off the bees and then they make it into a building material. And then they go get food. Then there's an undertaker job. Bees, like when a bee dies, the bees are like, get him out of here because he's bumming everybody out or whatever. And then they guard the hive. That's one of the jobs, which I didn't know what that meant. But there's this really cool thing bees do where if like a hornet or like a predatory thing comes in the hive, the way they deal with it is it's called balling. They all fly around the hornet or whatever it is, and they just start vibrating. They just start shaking, and the heat of all that vibration, like essentially cooks this thing to death. That's how they get rid of it, and that's also how they get rid of, like when a queen gets old. That's what they do. They go, hey, sorry, you got a tough retirement party. We're gonna ball you, and then they cook the queen. And also, that's like a big thing too. The queen is like, she's not really that's what I mean by she's not really like queen-like. She's not calling the shots. She's basically the reproductive organ of the hive. And when she kind of drops off, when her production isn't happening, the bees just get rid of her and they get a new queen. And it's like it was pretty interesting to read all the things they do that I think read to us as like ruthless or brutal. But for bees, they're just like, well, yeah, this is just, we're all doing our part. You think I want to be an undertaker? You think I want to be getting rid of these dead bees? No, we all got to chip in. And when the bees, when the bees are done with the queen, they ball her, and then they get a new queen. Also, there was this gnarly thing I was reading. There are new queens coming out, and if they come out at the same time, they fight to the death because like there can only be one sort of thing. And then sometimes a queen will come out and they'll find like another queen that I guess is ready. They can tell it's going to be a queen or something. I guess they get fed the jelly early on, and you can tell what's going to be a queen. And the first queen that comes out will go around and like Game of Thrones stab the other queens. So there's just only one left, and they have like these crazy, really up close videos of it, and it's pretty wild because it seems personal. It seems like they're really doing it. So yeah, they do all this stuff. The bees also are the only animals that can communicate symbolically, right? So like they have this thing called the waggle dance, which I've been working on. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to figure it out. But no, the waggle dance is they can communicate to other bees where food is, right? So they find food, then they land on like a leaf, and they walk, and sort of the relative, how they walk left or right, they do like a figure eight, and how they do it tells the other bees like the angle, and it basically gives them the information of like, hey, the flowers are over here. And this guy in the 70s studied them for 20 years and then like proved that they're doing this. And he won the Nobel Prize, which I like. I love that you can win the Nobel Prize for like, you can win it for like inventing dynamite. Everybody knows that one. Figuring out how bees dance, like what, just all writing a book if you're the president. Like there's all sorts of, it's just it's an award. It's hard to figure out how to win. You know what I mean? There's a lot of paths. So they do that. The bees can also, they can recognize faces for up to 2 days. And if you give them caffeine, they'll come back to it again and again and again. So it seems like bees are it sounds like bees are smarter than my dog. I'll say that. My dog, he can, if you point, he'll kind of be like, what? But he can't, I could never have him communicate like, hey, where did you see the Amazon guy? And then he walks in a figure eight. And he's like, he put the pack, he accidentally delivered it to your neighbor. So that was interesting to me that bees can do that. And they when they move the hive, this was another cool thing. They move the hive. So like, it's kind of a democracy. They send out, they're going to move the hive, right? They're like, this neighborhood, it's gentrifying or whatever. They built the Jamba Juice. We got to get out of here. So they send out 300 bees or however many. I don't know. It's not like a set number. And then they all scout out stuff. And then they come back and they try, I don't know how, they communicate like where they think the hive should move. And bees, when bees suggest like a bad idea, the other bees will headbutt them. Which that's a very funny, I like that as a system for when people have bad ideas, you just headbutt them. They go, all right, I'll think it through next time. But yeah, so that's what's so cool about all this stuff, was just realizing bees are, they're hyped for a reason. They're very cool. They're smart. They're an integral part of the ecosystem we have. They also have all that cool nature stuff. Like, a lot of times you'll find nature is like already done something better than. I remember watching this thing recently, and they were trying to make like planes fly quieter. So they just studied owls, because owls fly relatively, pretty much silently. And they were like, how are they doing this? And so a lot of the best ideas are already kind of in nature. And that's where we get a lot of them, which was pretty cool. And it was, I love that they apparently have like dopamine. Like the bees, when they like something, they come back to it again and again and again. And scientists think that it's sort of sort of like a dopamine loop, like we're all doing. If bees had phones, they would be checking them. That's what I'm trying to say. That's a business I'd like to start. Phones for bees. And so, so bees are cool. They're useful. They're also like, this was what I thought was interesting. I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, it's interesting. I like bees. I don't like bees anywhere near how people used to like bees. Bees have been forever just this reflection of society, right? So the first, like, they found these like pyramid stuff, drawings, where pyramid emojis, and it was basically like they found in ancient Egyptian lore, bees were the first tier of their sun god, became a bee. The Romans thought bees were souls. All the Celtic people, all these people thought bees were souls, which I like whenever a thing shows up like independently across all these cultures. It's kind of fun. And they were also using bees for stuff. Like there was this cool story I read where they had this honey that I guess they put like hallucinogens in, and they left it on the side of the road because they were like, who can resist honey? And then this army that was coming to get them, Pompey's army, they ate the honey. They were like, great, free honey. Weird not to be suspicious of free. I will say that if I was a soldier back then and all of a sudden there was just honey, I don't know, I assume in a jar, you'd be like, kind of an interesting thing for these people I'm trying to murder to do, but Southern hospitality or whatever. So they eat the honey, then they start freaking out. And then the other guys were like, now, and they massacred them, which was funny. There was also a lot of like people used to, in medieval times when they were like sieging another city, they're trying to get them to surrender, they would catapult beehives into the other city, which I think I saw Jackass do that. I'm pretty sure. I think that's the only thing that Jackass and like medieval warlords both did. But there was also a lot of cool stuff. Like people are messing with bees, which is interesting. Like making the whole African killer bee thing. Apparently, it was just one guy who was like, "I want to see if I can make a killer bee." Which, like, someone in his life should have been like, "Let's not." But he did, and he had him in like a secure area. He was like, "He's in my killer bee area." This is, this is where I show off to my friends. And then some dumb guy came by and was like, "These one," and just let him out. And that's all. So all the killer bees problem is just one guy being, I guess 2 guys being dumb. Which that's a fun thing I keep finding out through this pod is just like a lot of mistakes that are, country or world changing. It's just one guy being like this, and they're like, "Oh, we can't ever go back to the way it was." I also read this thing that I liked. The bees started making blue honey, and people were like, "Is bees in France?" And people were like, "Why are they doing that?" And then they found out there was like an M&M factory nearby, and they had gotten into whatever. Their food source was diluted, so they started making blue honey, and then everyone was like, "All right, well, we probably shouldn't eat that." But I like so going back to people seeing what they want to see in bees. I thought this was like the most interesting thing to me. So like the people. One last like fun fact. This just made me laugh. There was this thing Virgil wrote, the ancient historian, and this was the recipe for bees, which is a funny idea that you're like, here's how we make bees, because bees are just out there. You don't have to make them, but they were like, if you want to make bees, this is what they said. They said get an ox, then beat it to death, and they said, but don't beat it to death in a way where it's like a mess. If you get blood everywhere, it won't work. So you beat the ox to death. Then you like sew it up. You make sure nothing can get out, and then you wait like a month, and then there will be bees. And I love how much A, I don't think that works, and B, that seems like the craziest. That seems like the worst trade ever, right? Like I feel like you could get bees by going into the forest and finding a hive. I don't know enough to know if that's true, but that seems reasonable to me. You could get a hive, you can move it, you could hope the bees are okay with you. Beating an ox to death and then waiting a month while it rots and then being like, are we getting bees? I think that's a lot of the old stuff you read when I was doing the research for this is just a guy being wrong but confident. He's like, if you can just wait out the ox, if you can deal with the smell, you'll have beautiful fresh bees as soon as it's over. But yeah, so there was people always had these like very intense relationships with bees too. There were a lot of people who, like when I was talking about royal jelly earlier, in China, royal jelly is still a medicine, which I kind of get the thinking there, where they're like, okay, these bees eat it for 3 extra days and they live, 50 times as long. I'm going to try it. And there's in like Irish history and Appalachian history and English, there was all these. You had to tell bees there were a lot of stories where people kind of think, you can tell they think bees are smart on some level and understand stuff, because they would go, when someone died, especially like a beekeeper, they would go tell the bees, right? So they would like go to the hive and like knock and be like, I hate to tell you, but like Mark is dead. And, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of moving that humans had this relationship with bees. They did it in 2022 when the Queen Elizabeth or whoever it was. Elizabeth? You know what? It's either Elizabeth or Victoria, and I should know, but I also don't care. The whole Queen thing, you got to grow up, England. That's crazy. So remember the Queen that was real old who died recently? I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. Queen Elizabeth. That was it. It's Elizabeth. I'm confident. It's Elizabeth. Victoria was like a century before. But they had to go tell, there's like a royal beekeeper, which talk about a sweet job in 2022. Like royal beekeeper. First of all, AI is not taking your job. And second, I assume it I assume it pays well. It'd be kind of crazy if they didn't pay the royal beekeeper well. But so there was like a video I watched where he went and told the bees. He was like, your queen's dead, I'm sorry, but just stay here. Because that's the other thing too. I think they were saying they were telling the bees so the bees wouldn't leave, because bees will migrate. They'll leave I was reading these things of like beekeepers who were heartbroken because their bees left them, which is an interesting idea that like the bees could break up with you. You wouldn't think that doesn't happen with like chickens. You never wake up and your chickens leave a note like, we just don't like it here. And people had these really intense relationships with bees. And yeah, so going back to it being a Rorschach test, what was interesting was when you read about what each culture thought bees were doing, again, it's kind of about them, right? So the ancient Egyptians, so like we're talking about how the bees build these big hives and how that was like a testament to their greatness. And it basically just sounded like the Egyptians were being like, see, these pyramids are not crazy. It's not insane for us to build huge triangles in the desert. And then the Romans were obsessed with the way that the queens would fight to the death and succeed each other, which again makes sense, right? Because the Romans are having all these different emperors and they're fighting, and there's the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. And so there's all these succession crises. So it's interesting to see them sort of, again, make it about themselves. The English people were very into bees. They actually, some guy found out, he's the guy who figured out that the queen is a girl. They thought until like the 1600s, they were like the king bee. Which again, I think that makes sense to me, right? Because they have a monarchy, they have a king and a queen. They're like, this is, like I was talking about, nature has a lot of the best ideas, and I think when people see something in nature, they go like, that's natural, that's right. Therefore, I feel better about doing it in my own life. So people look at bees, and then whatever they want to believe, have a monarchy or whatever, they go, oh, see, they're doing it. How far off could we be? And then the founding fathers of America talked about how the hive was this democracy, and they were all working together for the greater good, which, it's a very American idea. So it's interesting to see people see what they want to see in bees. And then I was thinking about, my own relationship with bees and the modern relationship with bees. And I think most people kind of don't care. They kind of don't know anything about bees. They go, I don't want to get stung. And we're like the first civilization who's really not that into bees. Like it doesn't really matter to us. I think we're like the first time period where that's true. And I think it's probably a reflection of just, we are living in this weird time where all these things that mattered to everybody before us are kind of falling away. It kind of bummed me out in that way, right? Like, I think we're living through this time where community matters a lot less. We're like some of the first people to be as detached from our food as we are. I was reading this thing in this research, and they were talking about Thomas Jefferson spent a lot of his time trying to get like the wells on his property right. Because he was like, the water is messed up again. And so you think about that, he's a powerful, famous guy, and he's dealing with like his own water sanitation. And we just live in this world where you turn a handle and then water comes out. And if it's bad, people won't even drink tap water. They're like, ugh. So we're so detached from all the things everybody who came before us had to care about, right? Like the community doesn't matter. You can kind of be solo, live on your phone. You don't have to grow your own food. That's pretty new. Most people grew a lot of their food. You don't have to think about like the day-to-day, sanitation and water and all these things. So I think it makes sense that most people don't care about bees, because we're just not living lives where you're connected to the stuff that we've always been connected to. And I think it's bad for us. I don't think that's, to be clear, I think that's a mistake. But I also, makes sense to me. When I lived in a duplex in East Nashville as like a young comedian, who cares what it was like outside? It just didn't have any bearing on my life. So it was interesting to see, we don't really think about bees, and we're like one of the first cultures to not really, I mean, there's so many more examples. I don't want to bore you with all of them, but there was, Napoleon was obsessed with bees. The family that became some of the first popes, they were obsessed with bees. The symbol of Manchester in England is like the bees because they're like worker bees, all that stuff. So it was, it was, I don't know. It just made me think about that a lot. It was just, every culture has had this relationship with bees. They've seen themselves and how they view the bees. And then we kind of don't care because we can afford not to. But I don't think it makes our life better. I think, I'm living this, I'm really into the garden recently. I've had a bunch of like life changes since I got, I got engaged, I got married, we moved out to a place where we have a yard, all sorts of stuff. And it's, your circumstances sort of shape your life in a lot of ways. And I'm happier this way. I find that I like being connected to nature, and the weather matters to me more than just like, is my flight going to get delayed, stuff like that. So yeah, it was interesting to see. I don't know. I kind of just went into this episode thinking that bees would just be like an interesting bug. And then I left being like, oh, it's, bees, I think, say a lot more about us than we think. And we're living through a bad bee time. Bees are, in 2022, I think 63% of commercial beehives collapse. There's a thing called like sudden collapse disorder or something. And it's all the stuff I was talking about where it's like, people use pesticides and people have lawns. People have, they used to have, like, bees need flowers. They need places to nest. And if you just have this perfect manicured suburban lawn, I know that I'm very anti-lawn on this pod, and that's okay. I'm not trying to, I'm split. If you have a beautiful lawn and you like mowing and all that stuff, I get it. I like mowing too. And there's something fun about looking at I got a neighbor who stripes his lawn perfectly. And every time I'm like, damn, that guy's kind of cool. But I also, I don't think I'm headed that way. I think I'm actually like, I'm kind of like the lawn is a cult. We should get out of the lawn. We should just plant wildflowers and perennials and stuff for, just for there's an ecosystem. There's a whole system that functions and all these things play a role. And it's pretty miraculous how connected it is. And yeah, I want to do what I can to help the bees. They say that you can help the bees. If you have things blooming, native perennials, native flowers. A lot of flowers they make because they're beautiful don't actually benefit the bees because they don't pollinate, or I don't understand enough to know how they work, but they just don't do what bees are depending on. They also say if you put like a bee bath, which is different than a bird bath, but a bee bath, 1 to 2 inches of water, because they can't. Bees aren't good swimmers. They're not good at everything. And you let the bees have access to water. That helps. All that stuff. But it was just interesting to, it made me think a lot about my own life in the arc it's taken, and that, the more I live a life where I go, what's going on with the bees? And it feels like more traditional and makes more sense to me. It just makes me feel good. I really like it. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much more stuff about bees, and I'm not smart enough to tell you all of it, but I will say they're very interesting. If you want to take a deep dive, I mean, YouTube's got great bee stuff. There's also the Nashville Beekeepers Association. I don't know what it is. I just found it in my research. I'm going to try to go to an event and learn some stuff. They say that the state food of Tennessee is sourwood honey with biscuits. And I don't think I've ever had sourwood honey. And I'm going to go seek it out. I'm going to go try to find it. I guess it's an East Tennessee honey that local bees make. That's another thing that was interesting. There's Tennessee has 80 types of native bees, and honeybees are doing okay because there's money in them, right? There's commercial honeybees, those are the ones that are going to California for the almonds, and everything where there's money behind it will always survive, right? But it's the native bees that do different. There's leafcutter bees, there's carpenter bees, there's mason bees, there's all these crazy bees. There's what are they called? Vulture bees. We don't have them here, but I guess in Africa, there's every crazy animal is in Africa or Australia. There's these bees that eat meat and then create honey from it, which I kind of want to try. It seems gnarly, but it also seems very sick. yeah, so this I got a note here. The sourwood honey, there's one type of tree that they can, I guess, build their hives in. It's from one mountain range, and it's like 3 weeks is the harvest. And so I've never had that. I'm gonna try to find it. If you know where to find it in Tennessee, tell me. I'll go track it down. But that just seems. I love stuff like that. Again, it's just cool. It's cool to not buy just the honey and. I mean, I love the bear jar. That's one of the great inventions of marketing. But I'm gonna try to find more honey and try to learn stuff about it. But yeah, so they had all this going back to the bees collapsing recently. There was like some mite called like the Varroa destructor mite. They always have funny. Varroa destructor sounds like a wrestler, but so it was this mite and it was giving bees deformed wing disease, and then it would mess up the colonies. But they recently found some way they feed a queen something, and then the queen, all her larvae are like immune to the mites. I think they said I think it's like a vaccine of some kind. They crush up the mites and they give it to the queen, and then from then on there, I don't know, I guess, say from the mite, which again, it sounds like it could be something that destroys all the bees. It might be one of those like we solved the problem, we ruined it, but it might work and be great. I don't know. I'm not informed enough to know, but I hope the bees are doing good. I hope that I hope that was just a blip and they're going to deal with the mite, and yeah, it'll be great. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, man. I had a ton of fun learning about the bees. I'm going to see if I don't know if I'm going to go full on have a hive. That seems like a lot. But I would like to be like a bee ally, right? I would like to do something to help the bees. There was also just some fun stuff just before we get out of here. The whole so the bees have there's like a government branch that handles bees in Tennessee, and it's just one guy. It's just a guy named Mike Studer, and you can call him. His number 615-517-4451, and you're allowed to call him, and I guess just ask I don't know what the bee government does. I didn't even know the government was involved with bees, but I go, all right, that's kind of fun. Yeah, it was cool. Also, so here's some fun facts in the just because I thought they were interesting. Beekeeping during World War II, protected job. The government was like, we have to have beekeepers because they knew they were essential to food production. The whole bee's knees thing, that's when people say it's a bee's knee. I mean, not people you want to hang out with, but people will say it. Bee's knees, it's from flapper slang, which is, I think I opened for a comedian named Flapper Slang once. So like the flappers in the 20s, they had all these fun phrases like bee's knees. Here were the other ones that didn't survive till now. Cat's pajamas, I've still heard that. That's out. I mean, it's always like a freak saying it, but they say it. The gnat's elbows, was never going to work. Kipper's knickers, never going to work. The duck's nuts, that doesn't even... That one, it feels like they weren't even trying. They were just like, ducks, nuts. You're like, that doesn't even rhyme. You're not even, whatever. So there were three. So I told you about the crazy vulture bees. Those are cool. There's also Wallace giant bees, which they nest in termite mounds, and I guess they like mess up the termites. Kind of cool when they're beating up other animals. It's like a 2-inch bee, and then the African killer bees, you know about those. They're African and killer. And then there were orchid bees, which it said the males collect perfume all their lives, and then the female bees are like mean to them because of it, which again, if you make the bees human, some of these stories are very funny. But yeah, I mean, it was really cool. I really enjoyed this episode. I'm having fun. It's funny, like this just makes me... You learn about plants, and then you learn about bees, and then you learn. I'm curious what will come next, but I've had so much fun learning all this stuff. And, this is stuff I used to do on my own, just kind of deep dive something, and having a way to structure it and turn it into a podcast has been great. So, yeah, thanks everybody who listened. A lot of you have listened to all the episodes and commented, and that's super nice, and it means a lot. And, yeah, I mean, if you want to do all the stuff, if you want to like and subscribe and comment, all that stuff is very helpful. I'm going to keep doing this pod. I really enjoy it and hopefully I can grow it into something cool. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. I will see you guys next week. And if you're listening to this will come out after. I'll be in Dallas and Houston with my buddy Dusty this weekend. We're doing the Majestic Theater and somewhere else. And this will be in the past, but I hope the shows went well. I hope they were great. And if you were there, thanks. So, all right, everybody. Thanks very much. See you next week.